Hello students of Energy Prime. This is your first video class of the second stage. So yes, in the second stage, we will have just English even in the video classes. But don't worry, I will speak slowly so you can understand. And of course, you can always repeat the video and watch again to answer the questions, okay? So today we will talk about alphabet. And what is alphabet? Alphabet, of course, is the union of the words. Well, but exactly I want to speak about the differences between the alphabet and the real pronunciation in English. You, at first stage, know already some verbs as the verb to read. So, what happens in English is that the alphabet or the pronunciation is very irregular. We can start by letter A. Different from Portuguese, in English, this letter can have many different pronunciations. So, if you study the alphabet in the beginning of your course, it will not help you to read or to speak better English, because in English, the sound of the alphabet is not like the sound of the letters in the words. So, as some examples, we have apple. Here, letter A is pronounced as E. It's not A, it's not A, it's E, like apple. Another example is ball. Here, the letter A is not pronounced A or A or E, but O. So we say ball. Different from the word parents, which here is more similar to apple. But in general, we can see that there is no regularity in English, especially when we speak about vowels. The vowels are of course A, E, I, O, U. I'll write again. U. The sound of the vowels is always very irregular in English. So when you study the alphabet, again, it will not help you to discover how to read certain words. One famous example is the verb to read. In present, I write like this, and I say I read. But in the past tense, I speak I read, but I write in the exactly same way. So, words like read and read prove to us the irregularity of English reading and writing. So, why this happens in English? There are two important reasons, and I will speak about these reasons today in our video class. The very first reason is the mixture of English. English is composed by more or less 30% of Germanic language, of Germanic words, 30% of Latin words, 30% of French words, old French words. Of course, French is also Latin, but we consider it in a different way. And 10% of different cultures, different languages. So, this is the first reason. There are many different influences in English. So, it receives many different words with different writings and with different pronunciations. Let's talk a little about Portuguese now. When we speak about Portuguese, we call this letter E in Portuguese, okay? So, many words I speak like E, okay? So, I can speak igual, iguana, infeliz. These are words with I, which in Portuguese we say E, but the sound is more or less equal in many different cases. But imagine, in Portuguese, I say the word side. What happens to a Brazilian person when he or she reads the word side? He or she will read as I. So, what I want to tell you is this. This is a stranger, this is a foreigner influence in Portuguese language. And it comes with a very important irregularity. So, imagine in 50 years, in 100 years, the difference of, or the impact of the English words coming to Portuguese. In these cases, what can we do? Basically, nothing. Vou falar em português por um segundo apenas, porque trata-se também de algo em português e apenas por isso vou passar para o português. Quando, então, nos deparamos com uma letra como o I, ele tende a ser I. Mas quando lemos, por exemplo, uma palavra side, ele muda a sua estrutura. Ele muda o seu som. O que acontece é que, claro, muitos podem argumentar que site é uma palavra inglesa, portanto deve ser, e portanto é por isso que ela é pronunciada de maneira diferente. No entanto, daqui 10, 20, 30, 40 anos, as pessoas pouco vão se importar com o fato disso ser uma palavra advinda do inglês. Nossos filhos, nossos netos provavelmente não notarão este fato. Mas a verdade é que este I será parte da influência do idioma. Então imagine daqui 100 anos, conforme palavras estrangeiras entram cada vez mais no nosso idioma, Imagine a diferença ou o impacto e a irregularidade que isso pode causar. And this was exactly what happened to English. Many different cultures, many different languages in one place. So one person spoke this like sit, others spoke like sight, others spoke like idle. So you have a mixture of different origins in one island, which is, of course, what we call the British Islands, right? But this is not the only reason. The second reason why English is so irregular is the origin of our alphabet. Do you know the origin of our alphabet? It's really easy. Our alphabet comes from the Latin language. Latin language. So, remember, who spoke Latin? The Roman Empire, or simply Rome. Okay? This is important. Who spoke Latin? Rome. So they created our alphabet. So they created our alphabet for Latin, to use it in Latin. So our alphabet was created to Latin, not to English, not to Japanese. So what are the languages that come from Latin? We know Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, etc., etc., etc. Of course, the more distant the language is from Latin, the tendency is that more irregular it becomes, because the alphabet was created for Latin. So Portuguese, when we write or when we read, is more or less irregular, because it comes from Latin, but the distance is important. Spanish, the same thing. French, the same thing. Italian, a little less, because Italian is considered to be closer to Latin. So the tendency, it's not a rule, but the tendency is that Italian, for example, is more regular when we write than Portuguese. Now imagine English. Remember, English has a different structure. English has a Germanic structure. So, imagine the situation. If you have a Germanic structure of language, a Germanic way, Germanic sounds, Germanic expressions, what did they do? They took the Roman or the Latin alphabet and they tried to put together with a Germanic language. Imagine Japanese language very different culture. Imagine they take the Latin alphabet. It is a little complicated. Or Chinese. If they take Latin alphabet, it is a little complicated. Why? Well, because they speak in the way of speaking in Chinese is really different from what the Latin alphabet has. It has different sounds, it has different tones of speaking, it has many differences in general. So when you have a different origin, a language with a different origin, and you take an alphabet to that, and you try to put together, it is really complicated. Imagine Portuguese with the Chinese alphabet. It doesn't fit. It's not good. So this is what they did with English. They took the Latin alphabet and they took a Germanic language and they put together. And the result is a very irregular language when we speak about writing or about reading, okay? But this is not everything. This is a very simple explanation of the general idea. English has been through many different reforms, and they changed the way they write and they read many times. So, all these reforms also helped English to become a very irregular language. And, of course, this is not all. The pronunciation itself helped English to become irregular. So, we always speak about two types of English, which is the British English and the American English. We know that the American English has the tendency to be more irregular than the British language. This is because they speak in a simple way, and they don't speak the words completely, different from the tendencies from the UK, which is from the British English. Examples. Little. In American English, we generally speak something like little, while in British English, we generally say something like little. Of course, this is also very simple. Actually, we have more than 3,000 different pronunciations and accents in English. I repeat, we have more than 3,000 different accents in English, which is, we have 3,000 different ways to speak English around the world. We don't have just American or British English. Inside the USA, we have many differences also. And inside the UK, we also have many differences. And we need to include Canada, Ireland, India, Australia, and many other countries. So, something that we need to keep in mind is that the pronunciation itself is not so simple. I mean, it's not just American or British English. In fact, there are some pronunciations in the UK that are very close to the American pronunciation. And of course, there are many accents in America which are really similar to other accents in the UK as well, of course. And I said, of course, we cannot forget the variations of India, of Australia, and of many other countries, which are also important. But we need to keep in mind that we need to remember that these variations happened in the irregularity of the language, because in England we generally, not always, but we generally speak something like little. The same thing with letter A. There is a tendency to speak can. It's possible to find someone who speaks can in England. I repeat, it's not for everybody. It's not everybody who speaks like this. While in American English, it's more common to say can, like a M, different from the British pronunciation. So these pronunciations, they make a different irregularity in the language again. Okay, so what do we need to keep in mind is, first, the alphabet is important to be learned. So we need to learn the alphabet, but it will not necessarily help us with pronunciation or with reading. Why? Because the reading in English is really irregular, and the letters of the alphabet are not spoken like in the alphabet when they are spoken in different words. As the example I gave, letter A, for instance, is called letter A, but can be pronounced as A, E, O, and some other variations. So, what is the secret to learn good reading in English? Well, the secret is practice. If you cannot speak English, it will be very difficult for you to learn how to read English. In the second stage, we will train, we will practice, and we will learn a lot of reading and pronunciation. So, what we need to do is recognize the word in the context. Because, again, when I speak about I read, like in this example, what will help you with your reading is the context. So, if you don't know English, it will be very difficult for you to read this phrase correctly. This phrase is, I read a book yesterday. So, if you do not know what is yesterday, you cannot know that this is read instead of read. So, context in English is very important, and you need to know the words. If you don't know the words, you cannot know the pronunciation. And course, pay attention. It is very important to remember that this irregularity can cause some complications. So, many times, if you just read the word and you don't listen to the word, you will read it wrong, because there is no way to know how to read it right. Okay? So, reading in English depends very much on listening to. If you just read the word and you don't listen to the word and you don't hear it, you will not speak correctly. Because English is not like Portuguese. If you read a word in Portuguese, a word that you don't know, you can read and you can have the correct pronunciation. In English, if you read a word that you don't know how to pronounce, you don't know how to speak it. So keep this in mind. From now on, we will read more and we will repeat more and we will pay attention to listening. Okay? So thank you for watching this video. Don't forget about your lesson, and if you have any suggestion or question, please talk to your teacher or talk directly to us via WhatsApp or email. Thank you so much.